they get injured on the job, you have to pay them something. So a volunteer, that's the one situation with volunteers that you have to be aware of, is that a volunteer is putting their bodies and their time at risk. I mean, that's part of, you know, being a volunteer. If they get injured, we're not just covering, you know, like we would for an actual employee. We provide workers' compensation coverage for them. So that's one thing. It's not always clear, but when you do have volunteers scenario like that, I always, you know,
Well,
throw
like
that out
many of the
there.
board members were assisting in work like in the cemetery. Anybody who would be covered.
Board members have you're paid, you are an employee, you would, you know, if you're injured, assisting, whatever, doing something for the township, you do have workers' compensation coverage. So, it's, if we have a true volunteer that's not receiving any pay, there's no work count for.
Say for an example, he goes over there with a piece of his equipment, and something happens to his equipment, is his equipment covered?
It wouldn't automatically be covered. You know, your equipment is, again, if you're volunteering your equipment, you're volunteering that at your own risk. If you put together some type of agreement with the township prior to saying that I'm going to use my equipment, we're going to lease it for $1 or something like that, and you say, okay, we need to provide coverage for it, let's add coverage for that equipment, then it would be covered. Yeah. Yep, if you did that, that gives us an insurable interest in that equipment, so then we can provide coverage for it. So.
How about the public works groups? Periodically, you know, we have a
Prisoners
complaint.
or something.
Okay. Right. Usually, they're being paid by the prisoner or whatever, so their injuries, if their injuries is covered through their policy for them. That's typically how those are handled.
But they could still sue us probably.
They could sue, and your volunteers could still
Yes.
sue you. Yeah, your volunteers could still sue you. I'm just saying there's no automatic coverage. A volunteer could go out and use a chainsaw, cut their arm off, and come back and sue the township. And that's, we've got the liability coverage for. It's just we're not automatically, you know, for those volunteers, we're not automatically providing coverage.
Same thing if somebody goes in there with a lawnmower and uses it. Same thing.
Right. And that's with your, like lawn-mowing service, or?
No, I mean, we contract for the caretaker, he has insurance, so I mean, he's covered.
Right.
under his policy. The township, I'm saying, what if he brings anybody in subcontracts and he's liable,
Right.
township is.
Right. Right. Yeah, if he, and same way, let's say you have a contractor out there, he's mowing, he picks up stone and smashes someone's windshield or takes someone's eye out, they can sue him, but they could also sue, you know, the township. Of course, we're gonna say, he was a contractor, he should have his own insurance, and, you know, he should be paying you for it, but they're still gonna sue the township, and that's just usually what happens. And we'll provide an attorney in the event.
Now, who is this person going to be getting a hold of, or how are we going to handle this as far as your assessment person?
Our risk control department is, this area I want to say Pam Baker, so I'll be getting a hold of Pam Baker. She, you know, will review this. In addition, the underwriter, probably actually just be dealing with the head of the underwriting department, not that she would be out here. Basically, she's going to rely on information from Pam, and we'll discuss that. But Pam Baker is our risk control representative. You know, get a hold of her, she'll gather all the details and you know exactly what the scenario is and what's going on.
And I guess that's why we were interested in having to take a look at this stuff, because you're kind of the expert. We don't know what we're dealing with, and we don't know what we don't know, basically, at this point.
Right.
So we want to kind of be prepared and have somebody say, hey, this is some of the areas that you might want to look at. This might be some areas that you don't have sufficient coverage in. So.
Right, absolutely.
I mean, I think we're all comfortable with where we're at it, the way we have been in the past, but this is
Something new, yeah.
that's popped into the equation here that we just want to be prepared.
I agree. Any other questions or concerns?
I asked the gentleman a couple questions. If a visitor goes to the cemetery for a reason to put something on the grave or a funeral or someone, and they, in their physical condition, falls over a tombstone or something or whatever, are you guys covered for lawsuit on that?
We're covered for a lawsuit. In addition to that, we have what's called premises medical coverage. So any township-owned property, somebody twists their ankle, slips and falls, I mean, here they slip on the ice, something like that. We have some automatic coverage to pay for out-of-pocket expenses. So if somebody trips, there's a hole, whatever, they have to go get an x-ray. They would turn that into their insurance, but any out-of-pocket expenses they might have, they would turn into the township and we would pay for those. If you get into a situation where someone has pain and suffering and it turns into a large claim and they're damaged for life and whatever, then we'd have to get into a lawsuit situation. But the out-of-pocket expenses, there's automatic coverage for that, which would pay, you know, like I said, if there's a slip and fall, whatever, there's a sinkhole or something, we take care of those.
The township acquired property, was that listed with the insurance company?
The policy actually provides coverage for all owned property. So the minute they signed the deed or took over ownership of that property, the liability extends to all owned township property. So the only property that we would have to be identified to insure is structures, if we wanted to insure it for physical damage coverage. So say you acquire a piece of property, there's an old barn on it. Some kids go play in the barn and get injured. That's covered, liability is there for their injuries. The barn burns down, you didn't call us and add it, we wouldn't provide coverage on the barn. You have to call and add the structure itself.
Yeah, on the additional insured
Yes.
clause, if there's a committee, do each member of the committee have to be named specifically to be able to fall under the additional insured, or just the fact that the township has created this subcommittee?
The committee usually, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but when you create that committee, it's recorded in the meeting minutes, and it's identified who's on that committee. That's what we would look to, is that record of the committee was created and who's been identified as members of it, would be what we would look at. We're not so much concerned as, I mean, if something happened, we want to go back and make sure, okay, was this person supposed to be part of that committee, and we look at those minutes for that. So, yes, in a sense, we do want to know the individuals, and typically that's covered by looking back at the minutes.
But it can be after the fact?
Yeah,
Okay.
could be after the fact, yeah.
I do have a second question. On the regulatory taking,
Yes.
that you had stated the 100,000. Now, is that a maximum, or is that per occurrence?
It's per occurrence. Any other questions?
Before you go, I'll make a motion, we pay the bill.
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carried.
Do we need to do roll call?
No.
Because money,
Okay.
let's do that. Let's do it.
Vandenbush,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
Dennison,
Yes.
Marks is yes. Motion carried.
I don't really want it, before I adjourn, I want to say something to the board here, because it's going to be, I came by the cemetery and noticed that flag is shredded. And I just want the approval from the board, if you want me to purchase a couple new flags, we need one for out here, probably one for the cemetery, and run anywhere from The last ones I bought were $25, it's easy about shipping.
I'd say that's just general maintenance.
Okay, here's this one.
Yep.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get one.
We better have our public comment too for the meeting.
We're open for public comment before I adjourn.
Yeah, as far as your flag, make sure it's disposed of properly. Don't just put it in the garbage, make sure it goes.
I always
Okay.
give the new one to Aiden and let him take it down, and he's
Okay.
always disposed of them. I'm not saying what he did with it. but-
Okay, but they are not
I
going
know.
to the garbage like that. You know, send them over to VFW Hall or someplace, not them dispose of.
No?
I'd like to ask where the township clerk's at tonight.
She went up for the weekend, she was gone for the weekend. That's all I know.
We just saw her and everything today.
Is she excused from the meeting? I mean, who's doing her duties while
All
she's...
you have to do is have a quorum. Rich is taking the minutes. Okay?
Was there ever any lapse in our coverage right now?
No.
Okay, that was the only question I
We're all talking, and we all know what we're talking about, what's coming, and we know these 500-foot monstrosities are coming. And when Mr. Feiger takes our case, and we end up suing the township for $200 million, and he gets the jury to award $300 million, who's coming up with the extra money? Is it gonna have to come out of the township's funds, or is the insurance company gonna come up with the extra money?
The policy, the limits of the policy are what we have.
Period.
Right, if you had a situation, typically, if it exhausted the policy limits, the township's responsible for whatever would be.
And when the township has no funds, do they go into receivership then to the state?
They could have a special assessment, and assess the residents of the township.
Okay.
There's scenarios that,
All I needed to know,
Could happen.
thank you.
Yeah, going back to the concept of the regulatory taking, and sorry about continuing to beat on it, but, you know, with the developers coming in, if they take exception to regulations that the township might enact, and they feel that they are losing a profit opportunity, and that's the basis for a lawsuit, how would that be handled through the insurance company? If they, you know, file a lawsuit for lost profits because of regulatory actions that the township has taken?
and that's a typical lawsuit, is they're suing because for whatever reason they can't develop the property the way they want to, and they're out future income. So they would file a lawsuit. And basically, that's what triggers the coverage, and that's what we're gonna provide an attorney for, or what we would provide an attorney for. I guess, I mean, as far as what are you asking beyond that?
Well, if they determine that for every turbine that they cannot put in, that over a 20-year period, that they lose $1 million of lost profit, and they have 100 of these turbines planned, so they have a potential of $100 million of lost profit. How would this insurance policy help to provide coverage for that? I mean, I know that's a pretty excessive amount, but it's just an example, throwing some numbers out.
I mean, any lawsuit, the attorneys are gonna review the situation. I mean, they're gonna look at that, they're gonna look at what grounds whoever's suing the township, what they have. They look at what's our possibility of, you know, fighting this situation. I mean, what has the township done? Is the township in the right, or, you know, have they made a misstep in a certain situation? But they'll review that and advise the township either we're gonna fight this, you know, and we have this much as far as limit to spend to fight it. They could advise the township that, you know, we need to settle with this company, you know, they've done everything right, I mean, they're not violating any ordinance, whatever. So they'll review each situation and advise the township accordingly. I mean, but we have up to the policy limits to respond. If we got into a situation where we advised the township to either settle or, you know, whatever, and the township wanted to act differently from the advice of the attorney, that's the township's wish, that they could do that, but typically that happens at their own expense. You know, once the insurance company has advised a certain scenario, you know, the township has the freedom to do otherwise, but once they do that, they're acting outside of the scope of the policy, and that'd be at their own expense.
But before we got to that point, wouldn't you expect we would get taken to court to rescind whatever restrictions we had on the project they would consider holding it up?
Absolutely.
You know, before we would be sued for lost income.
Right. In my personal opinion, I mean, if the company, and this is just, I'm not an attorney, I'm just a lowly insurance guy, but if